on and are so quickly following along with the soundbite rather than looking to what we've been through in the past, the Patriot Act, and just looking at clear-headed people and what they're saying in a bipartisan way about the dangers that we're facing.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that's great about this app, just to sort of show you, because I think there are almost 1,000 people already in the room. Let's pull up the head of the Oslo Freedom Forum, as well as Marshall Kosloff, who's been doing the Realignment podcast with Sagar and Jetty, and see if we get them just to say hello as we show you the app. So,
thank you.
Thor,
hey.
You know Tulsi already, and Marshall, welcome.
Hello, Eric, and hello, Tulsi.
Hi. Good to see you guys. Thanks for jumping on and saying hello.
Welcome to this amazing platform, Tulsi. This is an incredible way of just breaking through and being able to have a kind of multi-directional entertainment / podcast. And Eric Weinstein is hands down one of the greatest hosts on Clubhouse.
Stop it.
Tens of thousands of people have joined Clubhouse because Eric is on it.
This is amazing.
It's not really about that. I think first of all, thank you, Thor. Welcome, Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, and the sort of one of the inventors of the modern internet. Hollis Robbins is a Black Studies academic. One of the things that I wanted to just sort of say is that there is this back channel that Tulsi is a part of. I see Austin Allred, who started Lambda School, trying to disintermediate some of the bad things that are happening with universities and their exploitation. I think one of the things that's really important here is just that there's an enormous back channel of people who are not that welcome at the NPR and the New York Times and all that kind of stuff, who have each other's phone numbers. And this is a place, so far as we know, that is not completely mapped. If you think about the Joe Rogan experience before people understood how powerful it was, at a certain level, I think what's going on here is that we have an enormous number of people who are contacting each other and doing so outside of the general understanding of the establishment. So I think it's an incredibly powerful back channel. Do you have any idea what you plan to use the platform for?
I don't. I'm just learning about what it is. What you did just 3 minutes ago, you opened it up and people are gathering to be a part of the conversation. So that's really what I'm most interested in, is finding these platforms where we can gather. I'm just as interested in hearing, other people's views and ideas on how we can deal with the threats that we're facing in creative ways, as well as kind of just sharing my take on things and opening up a new channel of dialogue. I'm very impressed, and thanks to everybody who's waving and saying hi and all of it. I'll get the hang of this soon.
So one thing
I was going to say, just hello. I met you at a house party in Windham, New Hampshire a couple of years ago during the primary.
Yes.
And I was really impressed with you in just a small house, private house, a nice suburb in New Hampshire, and a lot of military people in the crowd. And I just was impressed by your command of the crowd, and thought you might have done a little better in New Hampshire. But anyway, it was good to see you there, and it's good to see you here.
Well, actually, I want to talk a little bit about what Tulsi found out about during the last campaign season, which is effectively you have to actually run a campaign to figure out all the ways in which there are various rules that keep it a relatively insider's game. Is that something that you are going to be talking about now that we've changed administrations, about the ways in which the primary sort of has a very heavy thumb on the scale from traditional players?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to being able to kind of give the firsthand experience story, so that we can find ways to make sure that our democracy is actually really a democracy, where voters and Hollis, if you heard me in New Hampshire, then my spiel on this, that voters really have to be able to have access to candidates across the board, to hear their positions on issues, their experience, the judgment they would bring to the challenges we face, and so on, in order to make an informed decision about who you vote for. And as I experienced in my campaign, that frankly is not the case. You've got a few candidates who are featured either by the party or by the media or both, and it limits the exposure that voters get to a variety of the candidates who are bringing different views, different experience, things that may not be considered the quote unquote mainstream, or just speaking the truth that some people are afraid to hear or feel threatened by. And I think this is one of the things that is often discussed around elections and campaign finance reform, which is important, and dark money and big money and politics, corporate money, all of this. The thing that is never talked about, but that I experienced firsthand, is the multi-billion-dollar, essentially in-kind contribution impact that the corporate media has on our elections, benefiting certain candidates, hurting other candidates. And this is something that's never measured as far as how tipping the scales by the media really directly influences our democracy and voters.
Yep. And by the way, just because you're new on the app, when you see people doing like that, flashing their microphones, that's a kind of applause or assent or whatever.
Cool.
So when you see things and you see people, yeah.
Thank you, Mark. I see you. That's awesome.
Mark, do you know Tulsi already?
No, I haven't had the pleasure, but Ms. Gabbard, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Mark. I think we have mutual friends, and it's good to hear your voice and meet you here. This is great.
And Marshall, have you had Tulsi on the realignment?
Tulsi, I co-host with Sagar, who you know at Rising. We definitely put an ask in, so we'd love to. I tried to get him to join the room, but he's a little busy right now.
Nice to meet you, Marshall. He literally just texted me his number a couple hours ago, so we're gonna try to work our schedules. I appreciate the invite, though. Look forward to it.
Hey, Marshall.
Definitely.
I haven't seen you in a bit.
Yeah, great to see you all. Eric, I just want to ask Tulsi a quick question because this is fascinating seeing her here. I'm really interested in the idea that, especially since you're speaking about the point about the media, we're seeing all these new channels where you have politicians like Mayor Suarez and Miami using the format to get around the media and really build a direct relationship with people. So you could say that in many ways, this is a JFK Nixon debate moment for new formats. You're launching a podcast. Can we just get your thoughts on how your first move isn't launching with a, CNN or MSNBC or Fox News show and you're just doing a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a statement in of itself, right? It's do you want to be a part of a relic of the past or have real conversations? And frankly, that's a one-way street, or both support platforms and also take advantage of platforms that exist that really provide that kind of openness and freedom to have the kind of conversations that we want to have without the threat of being canceled. A Republican, I use one example, a Republican friend of mine from Congress, left Congress, got a contract with CNN. He's a pretty outspoken guy. Like there's no secrets about his positions on issues or how he feels about things. And then he went on CNN, I think literally once, and they said, no, you're not allowed to say X, Y, or Z. And then they just kept him on contract, but would never let him on the air because they didn't like what he had to say. And so he left eventually and broke the contract. But I think it's becoming more and more evident to a lot of people how important it is that, in whatever way we can, support these other new platforms where we can have the kind of dialogue that's being squelched in the monopolies of big tech that we're seeing today.
Great. Austin, Greg, welcome. Austin, Greg, do you guys have any questions for Tulsi?
Hi, guys.
Hi, Tulsi. How's it going?
I'm good. How you doing?
They're good. I don't have anything specific. I'll let you guys continue the conversation.
Well,
happy to be here.
Tulsi, are you aware of Lambda School and what it is doing currently?
I am not.
So, Austin, you want to say a little bit just how that might, if we had a truly innovative candidate, how we might try to change educational policy and better matches for jobs and education without as much student debt?
Sure. Yeah. At a high level, so we train people to be software engineers and data scientists, but instead of using, upfront tuition or student loans, we use something called an income share agreement. So basically, our students don't pay us any tuition unless and until they make more than $50,000 a year in the field that we train them in. And if they don't make that, then they don't make payments. So it forces incentive alignment of educational institutions in the way not much else could, because we like to get paid. So yeah, that's Lambda School at a high level.
That's incredible. I'd love to follow up with you separately and learn more about this. This is one of the things that came up. College student debt was obviously and continues to be a big issue, and I've always pointed out, the major disconnect between higher education institutions who charge a lot of money but then are not there's no accountability or follow through to make sure that the people who are going through their institutions are actually able to find some gainful employment, especially in the area of their profession that they've been trained in. So I'd love to hear more about it. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, would be happy to chat anytime.
Cool. I want to say hi to Tim Dillon. Is that Tim Dillon?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tulsi, I just want to say that I'm such a big fan of you, and as a comedian, it's so we always think, is there a way to make fun of Tulsi? And there never is, because you're so cool, and you're like, it angers me so much because you make it very hard to do my job, and I just want to let you know, don't change Washington too much, because I'll be in big trouble. So for every Tulsi, there's 1,000 people that are very easy to make fun of. But we watch everything you do, and I'm talking for a lot of comedians that we like people that are kind of no nonsense. We're just massive fans of you, and we hope one day that you have a much bigger platform than you do, because everything you say makes sense. It's hard for my job. It's very hard for my job, but it's good for America. So I'm a huge fan. And thank you for just being out there.
Thank you, Tim. It's good to meet you. I've seen a lot of your stuff on Rogan and elsewhere. Always very, very entertaining. I'm sorry to disappoint you that I'm not giving you stuff to work with, but
okay.
All I can do is what I can do, buddy. Thank you, though. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Let me also invite Greg and Drew. Drew is a flautist, tap dancer, artist, and someone very interested in international politics. And Greg is a mysterious internet figure who I follow, I very much enjoy. I need to know more about Greg's background. Welcome, guys. Do you have any questions for Tulsi Gabbard?
Yeah, hi. Thank you. Go ahead, Drew.
Hey, Eric, and welcome, Tulsi. We're always excited to have strong women leaders on the platform.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Eric likes to give me a hard time about tap dancing that I did when I was a kid, but I'm running an art studio in Silicon Valley, shipping art globally, so that's what I do. But
tap dancing's pretty cool too, though.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to have in your back pocket, but a long ago talent.
Yeah.
Tim, can you mute yourself? We're getting some feedback. I want to ask Tulsi a question. This is something that I have talked with Eric about as well. So you have gone through the debate process, and I think we all see that the debate format is deeply flawed. And one of the things I've asked myself is, what would be a better format that would really reveal more about the quality of the candidate? And one idea I had was to run simulations that candidates could potentially go through, literally putting them in situation rooms with particular things unfolding and seeing what they would do in those situations. Because right now, the debate format is more of a test of rhetoric and pulling off zingers and one-liners and people practicing lines with their PR team, and doesn't really show what would this person do if they were in the situation room with an Osama bin Laden type situation, and it would just be really interesting to see their decision-making process. So I think that's probably in a very imaginative format that would never take off, but I think it's ripe to be disrupted, and I'm curious what you would do if you could change the debate format in any way.
Drew, I think that's I love that idea, because you're right. I mean, the debates were always I hated them, to be honest, because there is a lot of prep and work that goes into it. But really what you come out with is, as a candidate, maybe if I was lucky, I got 5 to 7 minutes out of a 2-hour long debate to talk about. I can't even say talk about issues, because you got 60 seconds to say something and hope that it makes an impact one way or the other. And as a candidate, I walked away feeling like there was very little value. As voters, I heard constantly from people who were just like, yeah, I watched the first one and then I stopped tuning in because it was a waste of time. And we saw that in the viewership numbers as well. I think the first debate had 20 or 25 million viewers, and progressively as each debate went on, those numbers dropped significantly down to single digits, just pointing to the fact that people weren't getting value from the format, which was more centered around political reality TV drama than actually informing people like, okay, this is who this person is. As you said, here's what kinds of decisions they would make. I think your idea is a phenomenal one, and it actually reminds me of something way back when I once applied to become a White House fellow, and it's a pretty rigorous application process. It's a really cool opportunity for people who are able to who are selected, but in the final round of selection, they have essentially around 12 finalists and 12 judges, and it's a 2.5 day long intensive selection. And one of the things that they did was exactly that, is we all went into a room, we pulled positions like out of a hat. One person was the president, another person was the chief of staff, another person was the press secretary, another person was secretary of defense. And they gave us a scenario, and within, 10 or 15 minutes, we had to jump in as though we were holding those positions and responding to that specific scenario. And the judges had a chance to look and say, okay, how is this person going to react if they have the opportunity to actually work in the White House at the highest levels in a very real world situation. And, I can say with some confidence that the White House Presidential Debate Committee would probably never sanction something like this. But I think that the more the power of new media grows, you create a bit of a public, you create that external pressure to have this be a proving ground for candidates to test their mettle. I think it'd take a lot of work, but I think it would be great. And I think the other thing also is just continuing to push more candidates to do the long form podcasts and conversations that make it so, you can only fake the funk for so long. Once you get past that 20 minutes or 30 minutes and you've run out of all your sound bites, then the viewers, the audience really do get a feel for who are you? What kind of person are you? What do you care about? What do you and how do you approach different problems? How do you make those decisions? And I think moving in those directions of a completely different format than what we've seen has to happen if voters have any hope of having a democracy that's more than just a popularity contest.
So Tulsi, let me ask you a question about that before we get to Greg. Am I right that when we were talking to you about doing some sort of debate off of the regular schedule, that we found out that there are rules that say that you can't actually convene too many candidates in one place if it's not a sanctioned event from the Democratic Party? So I think it's really important to, what did we find out about the impossibility of having actual debates as opposed to professional wrestling style zinger contests where people pre-script their moments?
Yeah, this was a change that the Democratic Party put in place actually while I was vice chair of the DNC. I forget what year it was. Maybe it was I think it was actually 2015, leading up to the 2016 primary elections under Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She unilaterally decided to change the rules in order to essentially punish any candidate that participated in any non-DNC sanctioned debate. And what that means is other organizations could host forums, but no external non-DNC event could have more than one candidate on the stage at any given time, period, full stop. And if any candidate did participate in a non-DNC sanctioned debate, conversation, joint. If they were in a situation where they were on the stage with another candidate, then they would be barred from participating in any future DNC debate for the rest of the campaign.
So the obvious question is, who the heck is Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and why is this so obviously being handed out to legacy media outlets when obviously the rest of us have an enormous interest? I know that when I asked Joe on his program, if we had a crisis, are you clear about who you would want to take orders from? And both he and I didn't even know that I had the answer, but both of us instantly said Tulsi. So whatever my differences with you, whatever my concerns, whatever reservations I would have had, it was interesting that both Joe and I immediately, after having talked to you extensively, had the sense that if somebody had to make decisions rapidly from incomplete information with the best interests of the country at heart, that the three candidates who were off script were Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang, and yourself. And we both immediately gravitated to that. Effectively, am I correct that if those characteristics, whether or not you choose to own them, are present, there's nothing in the traditional format that actually highlights who is the best person in an unscripted and out of control situation where we only have very controlled interactions?
That's correct. That mechanism, that platform, not only doesn't exist, but they won't allow for it. And you mentioned who is Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and the media's involvement in this. She was the chair of the Democratic Party at the time, and this was one of the things I stood up against both privately and publicly, was the fact that she made this decision that was so clearly undemocratic and discouraged candidates from engaging with voters and grassroots organizations like the League of Women Voters or environmental organizations or any advocacy group that wanted to provide a platform to candidates to speak to their constituencies. That was taken off the table, and it was done so in a way that I was a vice chair at the time. None of us as vice chairs had any vote or input or were involved in any conversations of the sort. And frankly, that rule was upheld by the following DNC chair, Tom Perez, and the media, the large corporate media works hand in hand, because they benefit from having a monopoly on being able to feature these debates, if you can call them that, on their platforms. And so they get to make some money, and the DNC gets what it wants, which is limited access for voters and featuring those who they want to feature.
Unbelievable. I think this is the thing that soured me on. I have declared that I do not consider the Democratic primary to be free and fair by this one rule alone. Greg, do you have any thoughts? Then we'll go with Leah, then Caesar. Greg, are you out there?
I am, yeah. Forgive me, Eric. Thank you for bringing me up on the stage. Tulsi, it's a real pleasure to meet you. Welcome to Clubhouse.
Thank you so much, Greg.
So I host the video podcast series, The Respondent, a not-for-profit project tackling suicide, divorce increases, and the social distancing brought on by COVID-19. And during the primaries, I supported you and Andrew Yang. By the way, the debate exchange you had with Kamala Harris was magnificently played.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You are part of this political duopoly. Yet also, I think it's fair to say you're on the party fringe, a heterodox thinker in a democratic orthodoxy. Do you have a specific strategy or tactics that you and your team use to combat the power structures of the DNC and mainstream media and social media oligarchs? And how would you suggest, aside from campaign donations, we support you and people like you and Andrew Yang moving forward?
Thank you, Greg. It's a great question. And really, I think what we've seen, what I saw through my experience and what we've seen even over this past 2020 year is just the power of influence. And it's not just people who say, well, I've got 5 million followers or 10 million followers, but how rapidly impact is possible when people exercise that influence in their circles, making people aware of different things, speaking the truth on certain issues, and just pushing back against the mainstream narrative that is often put out. I think, for Andrew Yang and myself, we were completely written off kind of from the beginning. And it was because of a lot of people stepping up and taking action in their own way that we were able to get some kind of traction in a crowded Democratic primary. I'll give one example where, we didn't have much money in my campaign. And therefore we didn't have much staff. We used the vast majority of the money that we were able to raise to actually get our message out in front of people. And the media kept on trying to write really negative stories about Tulsi Gabbard's such a joke because she doesn't have 300 people on her staff like Pete Buttigieg does. But what they failed to, or what they chose not to feature, but what they saw and experienced, because they were with us along much of the campaign, was we had armies of volunteers who were doing the work that normally paid staff would do because they believed in the cause and the mission and how important it is. And, we had people who set aside their lives and dedicated all of their time and energy to this. So, I really think it's all of us recognizing the problems that we're seeing and figuring out, okay, what tools do I have in my kit that will allow me to be a part of that positive influence and voice. And like Eric said, it's not about agreeing on everything or, only focusing on the things we disagree on. This is about just coming together on the fundamental values of freedom, of freedom of speech, of a true democracy, where voters really are the ones who have the ability to make the best and possible informed decision about who the leaders of our country should be at every level.
I see that thanks, Greg. We next have Leah, an amazing comedian who obviously lives on free speech. Leah, do you have any questions for Tulsi about, in particular, free speech and the platforms, or anything else that might be on your mind?
Thank you, Eric. Honored to be here, Tulsi, and to have the opportunity to speak with you today. And thank you for your service.
Thank you, Leah.
I mean, just incredibly honored to be on the stage with you right now. I actually have an interesting question, more based around misogyny and being a female in politics. And I'm wondering if you've ever faced any sort of discrimination by virtue of being a female, and if so, how you were able to handle it. I work in very male-dominated industry. I work in comedy, and I used to work in finance, and I found that there was so much not only misogyny, but also internalized misogyny from women as well, and it was difficult for me to navigate.
Great question. There's a few different examples I would share, having served in the continuing to serve in the military and my time serving in politics at the local, state, and federal levels, both still very male-dominated professions. And what I found in navigating through both the military and Congress, for example, is, whatever people's perceptions are or bias or whatever, I really didn't pay any attention to it and just focused on my work. And my work spoke for itself. And through that, I was able to break through whatever people's misperceptions were and earn respect as equal partners. Again, both in uniform and out of uniform. However, the thing that we keep coming back to this, the thing that threw a screw in the works as I was running for president was the media. And early on, we had, as more candidates were jumping in the race, we just found, someone did a side-by-side comparison with myself and Pete Buttigieg, both veterans, both who've served in the military, and just the difference in coverage, basic coverage, as we both launched our campaigns, mine being, 80% negative, his being pretty much 100% positive. And then follow on articles that talked about how good it is to have veterans running for president, and then only talking about Pete Buttigieg and Seth Moulton, the two male veterans who are running, and failing to mention that I'm the first female combat veteran ever to run for president in our nation's history. As like, oh, oops, sorry, we forgot about her. Wonder why. So, the power of the media and why it's so important that we have other platforms to be able to counter the legacy power that they have and get more people to look elsewhere, and leave them and their legacy in the past.
We just saw Paul, one of the founders of Clubhouse, enter the room. And I think one of the things that might be really important is that while this platform is still very free, thinking about the wisdom of locking yourself out of the temptation to put a thumb on the scales, not because anybody wants to, but there seems to be something in the pressures of running a speech business that causes everyone, no matter how well-intentioned, to find out that they sooner or later have to put their thumb on the scale if they don't have a mechanism keeping them away from the temptation to bias the situation. Leah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you. Do you have a follow-up? Do you see that as well?
Yeah, Eric, it was actually, I wanted to veg you back off what Tulsi said in a slightly different direction, because something that she said really struck a chord with me was that she had to earn the respect of her peers and coworkers. And I feel the same way in my industry. And it's frustrating because I do feel like if I was a man, I would not have to earn the respect. The respect would just be given. And that is unfortunate that you've had to come up against the same battles as well.
Yeah, thanks, Leah. I don't know, from the beginning, from like basic training in the military, I just went in with the mindset, like, I don't want to just be the best female soldier. Like, I want to go in and kick everyone's ass. And I graduated at the top of the class and got the freaking sword that they gave me for graduating at the top of the class. Like, I think the more we can focus on exceeding all expectations, then that work, the work speaks for itself.
Caesar, did you have a comment?
Thanks, Eric. Tulsi, I just want to say it's so nice to be able to talk to you directly.
Thank you, Caesar.
I am actually a huge fan of your healthcare policies. And on that note, I was wondering, Hawaii is somewhat of a healthcare desert. It's economically dependent on tourism. And, our company worked with Alaska Airlines to try to get tourists back to Hawaii, to resuscitate the economy a bit. I'm curious what your thoughts are about, how the vaccine rollout is going in your state and kind of your general view of the healthcare system and the pandemic this year. I imagine it's been frustrating.
Incredibly frustrating. And thank you, Caesar. This has been something I've been battling here in our home state for quite some time on a number of fronts. I'll touch on the vaccine one, but then also just branch off into cannabis and how really kind of backwards our state leadership is. On the vaccine front, things are not going very well. I think like a lot of states, there's been a bit of a moving target on how many vaccines would be here, but also, I've been pushing that the decisions about prioritization for the vaccine should be based on science and statistics in prioritizing, high-risk healthcare workers and first responders, and then seniors above 65 who are facing, an 80% mortality rate due to COVID and cover about 50% of the hospitalizations that we're seeing. And by directly vaccinating this population first, instead of younger, healthy workers or people like me who some, in DC, they're, okay, you're essential because you're in the government. Actually, no, I don't think I should be getting this first, and the government will continue whether I get sick or not. If they were to focus on age versus occupation as being the criteria, then I think we would see I know based on the statistics, we would see a drastic reduction in COVID-related deaths and hospitalizations. And so that's a battle I've been pushing here at the state level. And I think this is a problem because even as in the last few days, the Trump administration changed their guidelines to basically agreeing with what I've been saying, and those over 65 should get priority, it's still really left up to the state governors and their Department of Health directors to make this decision. California has just moved to over 65. I know Texas, New Hampshire, and some other states have already, Florida have already done it. We're seeing in other countries how this has been effective, but unfortunately my state is not one of those who's looking at the data and making the decisions there. Just really quickly, I'll mention on cannabis, this is also a big frustration because if anybody's been following me, I've talked a lot about how cannabis, there's a direct correlation in states that allow for cannabis to be used to treat opioid addiction in saving lives and helping those who are addicted to these opioids to get off. And our state legislature, which is predominantly Democratic, a few Republicans, passed bipartisan legislation and sent it to the governor, I think 2 years ago, saying we need to allow cannabis to be, we need to allow opioid addiction to qualify for the medicinal cannabis laws that we have. And the governor vetoed the bill, and the veto stood. It was not overridden by the legislature, and he gave some bureaucratic response and there's a mechanism for this to happen. And the worst thing was he said there is no data to show that medicinal cannabis can help prevent death and sickness in opioid addiction. And this is coming from a Democratic governor. And it's just heartbreaking because I've met so many families and people who've experienced total tragic loss and who are continuing to suffer. And it's outdated policies like this that exacerbate that.
Well, thanks very much.
I've got to go in a couple of minutes.
Well,
I apologize.
One second.
All right.
I believe my wife has joined, which is unusual, and she may in fact be high on cannabis right now. She had for Tulsi Gabbard.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me on. Tulsi, it's so nice to meet you.
Hi, Pia. Nice to meet you.
I had a question for you. First of all, I'm so impressed by what you've been able to achieve against all odds in the last primary, and really interested in what you had to say about what it was like with respect to resources and getting access, just in terms of, needing volunteers and not being able to access the media. I guess my question is, how much of this do you trace to our campaign finance structure? And do you see any hope for us actually being able to restructure campaign finance so that there's some hope to actually allow for candidates that the people want rather than the DNC has chosen for us?
Thank you, Pia. This is the central question when people talk about how do we get rid of the corrupting influence in Washington? How do we make sure that people have access to information and candidates? Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, but it's not going to happen unless we build up the pressure, the external pressure to force the legislative action to make that happen. I'll give you a couple of examples. PAC Political Action Committee contributions. I think a very simple step would be to say that you could ban all PAC contributions to candidates and members of Congress. That would very much level the playing field for newcomers challenging incumbents to really be competitive. Because the longer people are in Washington, you look at their campaign contribution reports and you can see how 70, 80, maybe even 90% of their contributions come from political action committees, which means lobbyists. And once you take that away, that means they've got to actually go back to real people and make their case and say, hey, can you help support my campaign? But even if you didn't go all the way, you could say, hey, any business that does business with the government should not be allowed to make PAC contributions or lobbyist contributions. So then you can take away that conflict of interest. So I think there's a few different ways that we can approach this, but the need for it is absolutely there. On the resource front that you mentioned, as a candidate with limited resources, the Democratic Party, and I don't know if the Republican Party is the same way or not, but in my experience with the Democratic Party, there's so many barriers to entry for a candidate with limited resources that are put there by the party. I got letters from people saying, hey, Tulsi, I saw a poster or a video clip from the DNC promoting all these different Democratic primary candidates, but you weren't on there. Why not? Well, it's because I refused to pay the $200-something thousand to the DNC to be allowed to be featured as a Democratic primary candidate running in a Democratic primary. And, in some states, in order to be allowed on the ballot, we had to pay something like $25,000 to be allowed to have my name on the primary election ballot. So there were some difficult choices that we had to make. I chose not to give a few $100,000 that to the DNC because we didn't have the money, but also I just wanted to honor the people who were giving, $5, $20, whatever they could give to help support my campaign. And I figured that was not what they were giving me money for, to just funnel it to the DNC. So removing those barriers, I think, is critical for more candidates who are interested in serving our country to actually run for office, and make it so that our party platforms, whether they be national or state, really are those neutral arbiters that they're supposed to be, in saying, okay, well, we're going to help push these candidates forward so that voters can make that best.
It's fantastic. Tulsi, we're mindful of your time. Do you have time for two more? Dave, Ruben, and Nicole. Pia, thanks for the question.
I've got to run. This has been so incredible. Eric, thanks for making this happen and showing me the ropes here. And
just wanted to show you the power of the platform.
Oh, it's incredible. I look forward to doing this again soon. Thanks for everybody for joining us. This has
fantastic.
We'll
get to those questions next time. Tulsi, thanks for coming on, and we'll figure out what to do. And welcome to Clubhouse.
Look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Thanks, Dave, Nicole, Mark. Bye, everybody. Aloha.
Aloha. Shalom.
Aloha.